Welcome to the Cleaning Up Business Podcast. My name's Chris Guilfoyle and I'm going to be your host. In every episode, we're hoping to bring you industry leaders from a wide variety of service sectors, disruptors within their industry, and day-to-day entrepreneurs with some business and life lessons for you guys to take away. Let's jump in to today's episode.
I went from working for my dad on about 20 quid a week to 100 quid a week working for myself cleaning windows. So this is a business you can get into. It's a great business, but the sky's the limit. The group turns over in excess of 250 million and the business took a really bad hit. I think we lost two of our three biggest customers in the space of about 3 months. I didn't take any salary for about 4 or 5 months. We won an award for the best turnaround business in Europe.
Oh, wow. So what's the plans with Janitorial Express? Where's that going for the next 5 years for Gary?
But I certainly plan to be around for the next 10 years. There's a lot of egos in this industry, I have to tell you.
Welcome back to another episode of the Cleaning Up Business Podcast with me, Chris Guilfoyle. Today, my guest is Gary Fage. Gary is the CEO of Janitorial Express, ex-master of the Worshipful company of environmental cleaners, and also vice chairman of the Hill Club, which we recently visited and was a fantastic event. So, Gary, thank you for joining me today on the show. For those of you that don't know yourself, Gary, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found yourself in the cleaning industry?
Well, that's a very long story.
Yeah. 32 years. Congratulations. That's
fantastic.
Thank
you very much indeed. Essentially, I left school with no qualifications. I'd gone to about 3 or 4, in fact, primary schools and moved around a lot with my parents in the early days. So basically had no real education and decided I wanted to work for myself. I think I'd seen a film that inspired me. Can't remember the name of it now, but there was this guy that had gone off and built this empire. And I thought, well, you know what? I'd like to do something like that. And I think getting into the cleaning industry was low entry from a financial perspective. So basically, I bought myself a window cleaning ladder and a roof rack, stuck the ladders on top of my roof of my car, and basically started banging on doors. And I started cleaning windows around the Hampstead and the Belsize Park area because I lived in Swiss Cottage at the time. And I did relatively well doing that. I ended up buying a window cleaning round from a guy that used to clean the windows on my dad's fruit and vegetable shop. He'd had a heart attack and knew I was in the business, only really been doing it for about 6 months at the time. And all of a sudden, I went from working for my dad on about 20 quid a week to 100 quid a week, which was an absolute fortune. Working for myself cleaning windows. So clearly that the financial incentive was there. And that kind of set me off on the road, really.
Yeah.
So cleaned windows for a number of years, eventually by default got into cleaning pubs and offices. Did that for quite a number of years. Got a little bit fed up with that because I was cleaning about, 70 or 80 pubs a day in central London. Didn't really have the management structure sorted out, and I was getting called at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning when the cleaner hadn't turned up.
Yeah, to go in and do it. Pubs are also notoriously difficult.
It wasn't good. So decided to diversify into janitorial. Decided I liked that business a lot better because there were no weekends.
Yeah. So
sold off the cleaning company back in, I don't know when. Somewhere in the 80s. I can't really remember. It was so long ago.
Was it a size? How did that?
I sold it off in 91. Sorry.
What sort of size did that get to? Was it?
It wasn't huge.
No.
I mean, we'd probably turn it over, I don't know, less than £1 million or 750 or something.
Yeah.
But then we got into janitorial, really liked that. And I think the advantage I had was that I'd been in the cleaning industry. So I knew what the products did.
Yeah.
I knew how to use them. And naturally other cleaning companies were attracted to what we did. We started a little shop in Caledonian Road in 91, the year my son was born, in fact. And there were lots of passing trade, lots of people coming in. That's quite a central route into London. And guys used to stop off, buy materials on their way to the West End to work. And it just kind of grew from there, really. I mean, it grew and grew. And I think the next really major milestone was probably around 2018 when I saw a series on the TV by David Attenborough, sorry, called Blue Planet.
Yeah.
And that was like a wake-up call to me. I just couldn't believe what was happening to the world. I was incredulous, really, that we were destroying the planet. And at that point, I think I decided to myself that I had to do something about it. So I set about changing what was a traditional janitorial supply company and had been for the last 15 years into a pioneer as far as I was concerned with environmental cleaning products.
Yeah.
And at that point, I bumped into a guy that I knew through family connections called Michel de Bruin, who's a Dutchman. And he had a company called Greenspeed.
Right.
And I was really inspired by what they were doing. And he introduced me to vegetable-based cleaning products and probiotics,
Okay, yep.
which I've been harping on about ever since. So essentially, I set about converting my customers from using petrochemical-based products to environmentally friendly products like probiotics and vegetable-based cleaners. And we were going really, really well. But I think what happened was the pandemic came along in 2020, and that kind of all went out the window completely. People
I think that
just weren't interested.
That was a pivotal. I mean, lots of people in the industry, obviously, that naturally, I think that COVID piece, and we'll come on to that later. That's like such a pivotal moment within our industries now. I think it shifted the landscape drastically.
Absolutely.
We'll come on to COVID because that's always an interesting one, and how you navigated through that. When you first come in the industry, it's interesting. You sound like you was in a similar position to me. Left school, wasn't really sure of what we should do. What was your initial thoughts of the cleaning industry? When you thought, right, I'm going to go into that industry, what was your initial thoughts around that back then?
I mean, I have to be honest, I was quite insular. I didn't really mix with anybody else in the cleaning industry for a number of years.
Yeah.
It was all about my social life was my social life. My work life was completely different. Now, going forward in time, we'll perhaps get to that later, I made a complete sea change there. Yeah. I decided to embrace the cleaning industry and make that part of my social life as well. And to be honest, that was for a certain reason. I think we got to a point in about 2008 where there was another really bad recession.
Yeah.
And the business took a really bad hit. I think we lost 2 of our 3 biggest customers.
Right.
In the space of about 3 months. And I realised I needed to do something different. And traditionally, I've been quite an introverted person.
Yeah.
But at that point, I decided I needed to go out there and mix with other people in the industry, try to do some networking, which I'd never done before, to basically get the business back online again. And I think I joined Bix in those days. And I met Joe Long of Metza back at a networking do at a college in South London somewhere. And we kind of got on fairly well. And I think from there, I set about trying to publicise myself, meet other people in the industry and really change my whole attitude. I needed to get out there and I needed to socialise with people to make the contacts. But it was very difficult for me because of my personality. No, I just wasn't particularly outgoing. Yeah. People look at me now and think, don't believe that. Yeah. But there's been a real sea change. I've had to develop. And to be perfectly honest, I absolutely love it now. Yeah. And in fact, I'd say that most of my social life revolves around the cleaning industry. Most of my friends are involved in the cleaning industry.
I think I'm pretty much the same as you. Networking is something that I don't or haven't in the past particularly enjoyed, but I think it's a necessity if you're in the industry. So you've been in the industry for some time now.
Indeed.
Congratulations. How has it changed from when you first got into it? What's the difference between Gary back then? What does the industry look like then from your eyes to 2023 and the industry now?
I think it's a lot more professional, I have to say. When I first started, I was scrubbing off floors. I had no training at all. Just somebody showed me how to do it. And there was no training that I could see. Bix wasn't really available to me. It just seemed to be too expensive and not really what I was looking for. It's not knocking Bix for any particular reason, but at that time it just didn't suit me. So I think it was all about doing it yourself. It was all by the seat of your pants, essentially. You know, you just made it up as you went along. So what's changed is the whole thing has become much more structured now. The levels of training, I think, involved in the cleaning industry are just completely different from when I first started. We've become much, much more professional. And I think one of our major challenges really is to get that message out there that we are professionals. You know, most of the cleaning industry is now very highly skilled. And I think one of the good things about the pandemic was that people realized that we were trained and we were saving lives. You know, we were opening buildings, allowing buildings to be open that wouldn't have been if they hadn't have had the input from the cleaning industry. So I think there was a great deal of respect around our industry at that point. Unfortunately, I think it's starting to slip again. People have got very, very short memories. Definitely. And at the time it was about, you know, doing things properly. But unfortunately, it seems to be slipping back to pounds, shillings, and pence again.
I'll come back to that. That's for sure, because that's a point I'm interested certainly to get your view on. So the training piece, that's an integral part of what we do, isn't it? Do you find, you mentioned about the barrier to entry being quite low. Do you think that's a problem within the industry? Because for me, it's uber fashionable to be an entrepreneur these days, isn't it? And
it certainly is,
like you alluded to, I've been in the industry, but if I was thinking to myself, right, what can I start for myself that's got a market, it's established, we know it's £1 billion market in the UK. Do you think that barrier to entry is an issue for the industry? Because then you're going to get people coming in and not doing it the correct way.
I still think it's probably one of the cheapest, for want of a better word, industries to get into.
Yeah, sure.
Because you see so many, and I've noticed it with lots of immigrants that come into the country. These people are working like mad, and they want to get into that industry. And lots of our customers are people that have only been in the country for maybe 4 or 5 years. And they've started their own businesses. And I've got nothing but admiration for these people to get off their backsides. And I think they've proved they can do it with very little financial assistance. So I think if you've got the determination, then the cleaning industry is a great business. It really is. And I think what you see from the Worshipful company of environmental cleaners is the vast majority of guys that are in that company now are CEOs of big corporations, big businesses. Most of those guys started at the very bottom. So what I would say to people is, look, this is a business you can get into. It's a great business. I absolutely love it. But the sky's the limit. I mean, there's now professional training. So if you join a decent cleaning company, there's a career path that could take you all the way to CEO. So I think it's an amazing industry.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And obviously I'm a product of that because, you know, I started as a cleaner and I've got my own company now and, you know, who knows where that will go in a few years. I'd like to think I'm still relatively young. But and that's one of the main, you hit a fantastic point there. That's one of the main reasons we do what we do in terms of content, because the industry there's so many different facets to it, so many different levels that you can go to. And if we don't get younger blood or more people coming into the industry, you know, we're going to lose so much talent because it is such a diverse and fantastic industry. And like you say, there is so much you can do and you can take it as far as you want. I mean, you know, it's a billion pound industry at the end of the day. So in your 30 years with Jangro Express,
Janitorial Express.
Janitorial Express, you've obviously done many different roles within that. Can you give us some examples of some of the roles you've done throughout that?
Well, when you go right back to the very beginning, I took this shop on in Caledonia Road, and it was just me and my mum, basically. Wow. So my mum was serving in the shop. I was still running the cleaning company for the first 2 or 3 years before I sold that off. So I did basically everything. I took on a part-time guy that I met in Camden Market, got friendly with. He was I don't know, he was loading the van for me and, you know, unloading vans. So I think we had one little van at the moment. So I had a window cleaner that worked for me in the cleaning company that used to do the driving in the afternoons for me. So it was just doing everything. It was doing the paperwork. It was doing the marketing. It was serving in the shop at the trade counter. And I suppose from there, you kind of get slightly bigger. We went from there to a railway arch in Pancras Road, again, central London, right near King's Cross. And that was about 4,000 square feet, 2,500 square feet. So it was just, I don't know, unloading the vans myself, loading the vans, putting the orders on the system. Computers were fairly new in those days as well. So it was, and I was always keen on computers. I was quite fascinated. So I think I had a system from the early days that recorded the stock levels and did the invoices, where most people at that point were actually writing them all out. So I think I just developed my skills as I went on, and just learned different things. I mean, training courses from a management perspective. I had a business coach for a while. I think the most challenging thing was when I got to about 12 people, because up until that point, we had no structure in place whatsoever at all. Everyone did what they were supposed to do.
Just got stuck in.
And there was no sort of accountability. And I found that there was more and more and more pressure on me, because every single problem went through me. So I got somebody in that taught me about structure. I think this is one of the biggest disadvantages I had. I'd never worked for a bigger company. So if you've worked for a big company, you understand management structure. If you start right at the very bottom, then you have no concept of how that works. So I had a guy who used to come in and train me, essentially, taught me about structure, tried to put those kind of structures in place. I then got an office manager, a warehouse manager, which we never had before. And I think one of the most difficult things I ever found was actually letting go. So you always think you can do things best. We're all the same. We all go through it.
I'm still guilty of that now.
It's just releasing, releasing power to other people, empowering them, essentially. And
do you find that, sorry to interrupt again, did you find that pays, this is a personal thing for me now, do you find that paves the way for people to perform better? Because in my experience, sometimes the more leeway I've gave people within the industry, they take that as, I can just pretty much do what I want. Do you find that's always a positive thing to let go?
It's a positive thing from my perspective. It's got to be, because you can't do everything.
No,
so
of course,
you need to release it. As far as the individual's concerned, they either win or they fail. So essentially, it turfs out the guys that really are not going to make it, or it identifies the guys that really can make it.
Do it.
So it's quite a cathartic process, really, in some ways, because when we implemented, there were some people that just couldn't take the structure at all, and there were tantrums, and they stormed off. But there were others that embraced it, and obviously they sort of grew with the business. So it's a structure. It's a process you need to go through. And as I say, starting right at the very beginning, it's something you have to learn. It's kind of hasn't been taught to you at that point.
So with so much experience in the industry, you must have had plenty of stories. So in that time span, what's one of the worst business experience you've had that you look back on as a particularly difficult time, hard time, and what were the lessons that you take away from that? Can you remember a particular one? And try not to say COVID, because everyone says COVID.
Well, that's exactly where I was going.
It might be. Go on.
I think putting COVID to one side, 2008 was a particularly bad time for us.
How does that, out of interest for me again personally, 2008 to what we're doing now, the financial market is now, how close are they together? Like, is there similarities to where we are now? Because it's supposedly, you hear in the news all the time, we're in difficult times, recession, not in recession, whatever it may be.
I think it's completely different.
Okay.
So there are labour shortages now.
Yes.
Yes,
there is.
Right. So back then, we lost, I think, a third of our turnover in the space of about 2 or 3 months.
Is that customers going, look, we're reviewing our spend, or we're pausing it, carte blanche?
I mean, we lost 2 very big accounts. So we had 3 big accounts, and we lost 2 of them. I say for no fault of our own, it was circumstances, essentially. One company had been sold out, and another one, there was I can't quite remember what, a management buyout or something. They decided to go a different way. So that was a real smack in the teeth for us. but everyone was suffering at the time as well. So we decided as a business, we went to all the staff and said, look, we're in trouble. We've lost a third of the turnover. And we decided to cut everyone's salary by 10%.
Right.
Now, there wasn't raging inflation at that point.
Yeah.
So it was a completely different set of circumstances. But everyone in that business, and I think at the time we probably had about 15 staff.
Right.
And every one of them said, yeah, look, we want to keep this going. And I think we knew so long as we could ride this out, we'd be okay. And we just cut our overheads back to the absolute basics. We were taking work on for nearly any profit at all. But it was about seeing the recession out and getting over that. And to be fair, we did that.
Yeah.
And that's when we went on this kind of growth spurt, when I went out there, started engaging with people in the industry. And in fact, I think it was 2017, we won an award for the best turnaround business in Europe for this particular coaching company that we work for.
Okay.
So that showed you how we sort of bounced back. And I think from there on in, it just gave us the impetus then to kind of carry on. Yeah. So that was a tough time. Yeah. That was a really, really tough time.
How did that affect you personally?
Well, I didn't take any salary for about 4 or 5 months because I had to make sure I paid the guys.
Of course.
So we made sacrifices. I lived on some savings that I had.
Yeah.
But coming back from that, it was such an experience. And I think having been in that situation, you think, I'm never going back there again. Yeah. I'm going to do everything I can.
Make sure it doesn't happen.
And it kind of spurred me on. Yeah. As I say, overcome the fear of networking, really put myself out there and became a social animal, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was probably the worst time I'd experienced.
You mentioned about COVID, so we'll touch on that quickly. Yeah. I've said this on most podcasts. For our industry, such a massive shift in landscape. How did you fare during COVID?
During COVID was okay because the government was supporting us. That was good. We stayed open every single day. We were down to a skeleton staff. I think I had one girl in the office, a guy in the warehouse, my operations director, and myself. I was going in maybe 3 days a week.
Yeah.
So there were still people out there, still people that needed the sanitizers that we were supplying. So we stayed open the whole time. With the government's support, and a lot of people knock that, but for us, I think it was crucial, and I think it kept the economy going. So credit where it's due. But I think after that, it was difficult for us because we're basically very centrally placed. Islington, we're 2 miles away from the West End, 2 miles away from the city, and the vast majority of our business was in the city of London.
Yep.
And as you probably know, that was basically closed for 2 years. So you referred to the Jangro Group previously. I think out of every Jangro member, we were probably hit the worst because all the accounts we were servicing were closed. So people weren't using the office's loo paper; they were using their own.
Yeah.
Hence, we were badly hit by that. But that's gone by now, and things have picked up, and we're way over where we were before. And it's encouraging, but again, an incredibly challenging time when we'd have an average order previously might be £300 with toilet rolls. They were down to about £60 or £70. So
it's a big.
It wasn't
decrease.
just the volumes; it was the size of the orders as well.
You mentioned earlier, and you alluded to it, and I'm going to bring it up now. Obviously, COVID. We mentioned it, and I've discussed it at great length with a colleague of yours, Jim Melvin, about I think we missed the boat in COVID, and its efforts are dwindling in terms of keeping us at the forefront. What's your particular view on that?
Well, as I said previously, I think at the time we were almost seen as heroes, and we were out there, we were preaching to people about what we were doing, and people really appreciated that. And I thought, I've been harping on for years about trying to raise the profile of the cleaning industry. I felt that COVID actually did that. Yeah. People were appreciating the fact that we were keeping buildings open. But as I say, unfortunately, and we, as an industry, we may well be guilty of that as well. It's just going back to pounds, shillings and pence again. It's about the money and not about the service that the industry can provide. And that's a shame. I tried to use my position as the master of the Worshipful Company of Environmental Cleaners to preach that message. And I know Jim Melvin is particularly passionate about raising the profile.
Definitely.
With the parliamentary group that he's part of and the CSSA, British Cleaning Council.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think we really need to be harping on about it, and it just seems that the politicians are not really interested. I mean, I don't think they realise quite how tough it is for the cleaning industry as far as recruiting is concerned.
I'm having a nightmare with that at the moment myself, personally.
I think we all are. Look, I'm no politician, but it seems that there are lots of people over here seeking asylum, and they won't let them work. And we've got job shortages. I mean, I'm not sure how that stands from a political point of view, but it just seems crazy to me. Why can't those people at least work while they're waiting to see if they're approved or not?
On a temporary visa.
And we've got such shortages.
Yeah.
And we've seen it in the health service as well. So it's a very difficult situation at the moment.
How can we as an industry do more?
I think our leaders need to talk about it. I think we need to get more publicity surrounding it. And again, I go back to Jim. He's very passionate. He's been trying to push it through the British Cleaning Council. We just got to talk to people, essentially.
Yeah.
We've got to talk to our MPs because most of them don't realise this is going on. I'm not sure many of them care.
No. I mean, it's a challenge.
It's a real challenge.
We went to see our local MP, and I think it was just a PR thing for her more than anything, to be honest, because there wasn't much really follow up after that. I just wondered, how I sort of toy with this myself, how we as the industry can do more. Do you think we're quite disjointed as an industry? Obviously, you mentioned about the BCC, BICS, CSSA. You've got these these varying different. Is there not a collaborative approach to be had there? Well,
I think it's supposed to be the British Cleaning Council, isn't it?
Okay.
But I think, I don't know, I don't want to be too controversial, but...
Yes, you do. Yes, we do.
It's people have their own little fiefdoms, and it's often quite difficult for them to collaborate together.
Okay.
And that's a shame, really.
Yeah.
And I'm not pointing the finger at anyone in particular, but it's just human nature.
Yeah.
And I think we need to get over that. And I think the livery company can take a lead. It's something we all need to work on.
Internal politics of such a big industry is difficult, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of egos in this industry. I have to tell you, you obviously know yourself. But I suppose the vast majority of the cleaning industry are self-made people.
Of course.
So without those egos, they wouldn't get to where they will.
No, you're spot on.
But it is very difficult, and I've seen it myself at our court meetings where, there are people pulling in different directions. And as I say, I suppose you would expect that.
Yeah.
The egos involved.
It's not just the cleaning industry. I'm not sure every industry is the same. I just wondered how we get that more collaborative approach. But I think
it's even more so in our industry because, as I say, most people are self-made.
Yeah.
They've come from the bottom. So to drive you on, you need a certain type of personality. And sometimes that can be abrasive.
Yeah.
Not for bad reasons, it's just the way people are. But what I am astounded at is the amount of collaboration there is within the livery company, although there's these people pulling in different directions. As a livery company, I think we all get on really well. I think there's some really good relationships to be had there as well. So the social side of it is very good.
We'll come on to the delivery in a short while. But even just going to the Hill Club a couple of weeks ago, just seeing people, how they interact with each other, how they collaborate, that was just great to see. And I hadn't seen that before. So it goes on. We just need more of it, don't we?
Yeah, we absolutely do.
You'll have to do some more boat pies for us, Gary. A regular
I think one a year is enough.
Yeah, my liver's still getting over from the last one. So tell me about the Jangro Group. And tell me your story about that.
Okay, so I think I joined the group in about 99, joined the board in 2000. And I just love the concept. So essentially it's we are now 47 independent janitorial distributors,
Right.
that got together some 40 years ago via our current lifetime president, a guy called Brian Squires,
Right.
who was due to be on the boat. Unfortunately, his wife had an accident.
Oh, God.
He couldn't turn up. But anyway, I digress. So essentially, Brian worked for a company called Spar, which you may know of. It's an independent brand. And essentially, they get local corner shops together
to
sell the Spar brand.
Yep, got it. I know. Yep.
And he decided that he would try and introduce that to the cleaning industry.
Right.
And it took a long time. I mean, in the early days, I think they had about 10 members. And again, it was very difficult to get people to buy together as a group because self-interest comes into that. But slowly we built on that. And we had more and more members join. There were a few splits in the group where people went off their own way and did their own thing. But essentially, the idea in Jangro survived. And by the time I joined in about 1999, I believe it was, there was a real consensus of quality distributors.
Yeah.
So there was probably about 30 of which, there's 30 at the time, and I would say about 20 of those were really, really committed, and they were reasonably young, as was I at that time. And we were all driving ahead and pulling together. And I think one of the most difficult things really was to sometimes take a hit in your own business for the benefit of the group.
Okay.
So essentially the group would do a deal on black plastic bags. All of a sudden, I can buy them 5p cheaper. That's not what the group was about. It was about buying together as a group, sticking together, and you ride that out. And eventually the group comes through. So there's a bit of self-sacrifice went on with all of the members. But I think it's now built into a really, really strong brand. The buying power of the group is pretty awesome. And we can compete with anybody in the industry, without doubt. We have that buying power. The group turns over in excess of 250 million. And it's basically there for its members. It's almost like a franchise, but every franchisee owns part of the main company.
Yeah.
So it works well. I mean, we're really starting to develop national accounts now as well. So we'll get a national account, and each one of those members will service their own area.
Is there any like KPIs that you have to meet to be part of that group?
Very much so. There's turnover. Obviously, we have people trying to join us that are very small, and it just doesn't work for the group. Or also companies that are too big as well. They may not fit and buy into the ethos. So you need to be of a certain size really to make it relevant to you and to the group. And I've got to say, the group buyers a group, when we do a deal with a manufacturer, that manufacturer knows that 95% of the business they will get from the group on that particular product. Excuse me. And that's been part, I think, of the group's success. The members' commitment to buy together. Yeah,
that's nice to see, isn't it?
It's great. And I was at a Jangro board meeting last week in the Forest of Arden, and we were talking about the future of the group, the next 1, 3 and 5 years, what we're hoping to do. And I was saying to the guys at the meeting, obviously I've been on the board longer than most of them because I'm the oldest.
Dave Clark from Janitorial, who I know.
Yeah, he was on there. Yeah. Ross from Maintenance Supply, Phil from Ace, and 1 or 2 others. Sorry for the ones I've forgotten. Also our CEO, Joanne Gilliard as well. But I was saying to the guys, in all the years I've been to Jangro meetings, and I've been going for a few years, every time I go there, I learn something new. Every single time without fail. So, I put an awful lot into that group, but I get an awful lot out as well. I mean, I came home with notes on things that I hadn't realised that other members had told me.
I think, maybe the actual contract cleaning, again, a prime example of a collaborative approach between people in the same market, how that works. Maybe we could take a leaf out of that book.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, I think there was a guy a few years ago, I forget his name now, but he set up a kind of consortium with smaller contract cleaners to handle bigger accounts. Okay. I think it worked for a while. I'm not quite sure what happened to it, but
like you say, get different people, different ideas, and,
Sure.
and it just goes out, doesn't it? So what's the plans with Janitorial Express? Where's that going for the next 5 years for Gary?
So as you probably know, I appointed an MD, David Gourlay, good guy, really good guy. Just so I can kind of step back a little bit.
Okay.
Probably at some point we might go for a management buyout because I've got some really good guys. But I certainly plan to be around for the next 10 years.
No retirement yet for Gary?
No, I can't retire. My friends are all in the industry. I'd go mad. So, maybe I step back as time goes on. But I think I've got something to offer in the contacts I've got in the industry. And, hopefully that can open doors. I'm very keen on marketing. So I tend to concentrate on that these days, maintaining relationships with clients as well. I think a lot of that went out the window with COVID. You couldn't go out.
Couldn't go see people.
And clearly my time at the livery company as well as master, it's almost a full-time job.
Yeah.
So again, I had to step back from meeting clients, but it's certainly my intention now, and I've started doing that already, going out and meeting the clients. The people are really important to me. For me, it's about building relationships with clients. They've got to know they can trust you, essentially. So
I think
so more of that for me.
It's all relationships, isn't it, our industry? So you mentioned delivery.
Indeed.
Which we're going to discuss now.
Okay.
I've been watching from afar with great interest. So
Right.
I've got a vested interest of this more. For those of the viewers that don't know, tell us what delivery and the Worship company is.
Yep. Okay, so essentially, if you go back 1,000 years.
Okay. I can't remember last week, but go for it.
So essentially, to sell your wares within the City of London 1,000 years ago, you needed to be a member of a guild or a livery company. And they were set up essentially to ensure that people weren't shafted. So it was a bit like Weights and Measures at the time.
Yep.
And they tended to congregate in certain areas of the City of London.
Right.
For example, the bakers were in Bread Street. The butchers were in, I can't remember, somewhere else. But it was all around families, essentially, and particular churches as well. So they were all fairly religious that time. So there was religion, there was the trade, and there was a family thing. So it was about ensuring that people weren't ripped off. You probably remember the story from school about the baker's dozen.
Yeah.
And that was essentially, they would rather give people more than give less and ruin their reputation. So, I mean, that went on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And I think there was a kind of a lull around the Middle Ages, and it wasn't until I think 1929 or thereabouts that the first new livery company was formed for 300 years or something. The numbers are probably wrong, but a rough figure. And at that point, there was a new company formed, and it was the Master Mariners, about 1929. So they were the first of the modern livery companies. The others were referred to as the ancients. And the Worshipful Company of Environmental Cleaners is, in fact, a modern livery company.
Okay.
So essentially what we're looking at now is trades that are relevant to this particular era. I mean, bowyers, for example, there are not many people that work in bow making these days, so they've had to find a different industry to attach themselves to. But just getting back to the modern livery companies, the environmental cleaners are number 97 in precedence.
Okay.
And the reason I got involved in it was that my wife's father was a founder member of the original Guild of Cleaners.
When was that?
Now you're asking me. I think it was about 1976 the Guild was formed.
Nice.
I'll get crucified for this. And we just celebrated 50 years as a livery company. 50 years as a guild. So work that back from 2023. You can work it out. You're younger than me. You're quicker than me.
Mash calculator. Go on.
So essentially, when I first met my wife, I was a client of hers, and we got together. It's a long story. I won't even go there. So essentially, she introduced me to the livery.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed, meeting guys there. initially I used to go just socially to enjoy the fantastic lunches and the wonderful places. But as time went on and I started to change the way I did things, and socializing was becoming more part of what I did in my business, delivery became very relevant to me. And about 8 or 10 years ago, I was asked if I would like to become master.
Yep.
Because it's quite a long process. I mean, you know you're going to be master up to 8 years before.
Okay.
So we probably know who the next master is going to be for the next 8 years or 9 years.
So for those of you that don't know, what does that entail, being the master?
It's a very good question.
Well, what doesn't it entail, if that's a short list?
It involves lots of attendance at livery events throughout the city. So there are currently, I think, 111 livery companies in the city of London.
I've seen other ones for other industries.
Yeah. So it's very much about being part of that whole scene.
Yeah.
Very much involved with the City of London Corporation. So essentially, you're invited to fantastic lunches, events. I mean, livery is all about, really, it's about education.
Yeah.
So that's come from the very beginning when the guilds were first formed. And we support lots of education. We support the military as well. It's about governance as well in the industry. It's about fellowship. And it's also about charity as well, which is really important. And I don't think I realised when I first joined how much livery companies actually give. So as a whole, I think the livery in general donate, I think in the last year it was about £75 million.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So
it's about good causes. Clearly, we're not an old company and we're not very rich. I mean, if you look at the goldsmiths, they are uber rich, own lots of property in the City of London. But they do an awful lot.
Okay.
The Great 12, some of the original companies, give a lot of money to charity.
Yeah.
And we try to do that through our charitable giving. We support things like the air ambulance, the big breakfast as well that feeds young kids that parents can't afford to give them proper breakfasts, and other related industry charities. We work with old people, but we also do an awful lot with the military.
Okay.
And I'm particularly proud of our associations with those guys. In particular, it's the Army Medical Corps that we have an affiliation with. Later on, I think we have connections with the Navy and also the Air Force as well. So it's working with all three services and just trying to support those guys. And we make awards every year. And I become good friends with a chap called Jeremy Rowan, OBE, who I'm lucky enough now to have as a non-executive director on my board. And I met Jeremy through a livery company event. When I first met him, I was in absolute awe of him. This man was the head of British Army Medical Corps, as I say, probably in charge of 4,000 people. But some of the stories he told me about the courageous work that those guys did in Afghanistan, in Bosnia, and places like that, it's really humbling.
Yeah, I bet.
And to be able to give something back to those guys, and the prizes we give them, it means an awful lot to them. It means that people in the country, people in the City of London, appreciate what they do, and it's fantastic for morale. So that's something I'm very proud of, our association with those guys.
And you can see you're clearly passionate about it. The livery, I'd say for me, I was mentioning this to associate of ours, colleague of yours, Phil Smith. It seems very recently I seem to be seeing a lot more of the livery in the cleaning industry Pacific. Has something changed that you guys are having a big push to get new people into it, or just shout about what you do for the industry a lot more than you maybe had previously? Because it seems the last sort of 6 to 12 months that I've really seen more of you guys out and about on social media and speaking about it more.
I think LinkedIn's got a lot to do with it.
Okay.
And I think, so we've talked about my journey from this shy retiring chap to somebody that's out there on, getting every bit of publicity I possibly can.
Got to be done in this modern era.
It absolutely does. And it's a lesson I've learned. And I think and I'm not taking taking responsibility for this. But I think with the bit of experience I had with social media, I've tended to try and promote it as much as I possibly can. And I just don't think it was in our psyche before. So hopefully the one positive change I think that I have made, and I'll leave the livery in my year, is trying to bring more exposure to what we do. I mean, I can't ever remember seeing stuff previously on LinkedIn.
I couldn't. I can't. Definitely not. It's definitely within the past 12 months, for sure.
And we've got so much to offer. When you see some of these fantastic halls that we get to visit, it's such a privilege. I mean, it's quite incredible. And I just thought, well, you know, other people need to see this. And there was a bit of a tradition around certainly not taking photographs in these halls. That was frowned upon.
Right.
So that's becoming slightly more relaxed now as well. I think for security reasons there was a concern, and it just wasn't part of the tradition. But that's changed completely. I mean, I have to say, my very good friend at the Worshipful company of constructors, David, is a great advocate of social media. He's got a whole team there that are working on it.
That's good.
And you'll see these guys out there promoting what
I've seen the construction one.
Yeah. So they are the guys that are really pushing it, and I think we're, you know, close behind them in trying to get the message out there. Essentially, it's a great experience. It really is. Some of the things you get to do, and as
what does a meeting look like? What does a meeting? I'm going to go get. I'm obviously going to get an invite following today at some point. But what does a meeting look like?
It's a lunch basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So most of the things we do are lunches. Our home is Armourers Hall. But we tend to go on away days as well. I mean, recently, the next one coming up, I think, is our military awards. That's going to be at Fishmongers Hall.
Oh, right, okay.
Which is obviously quite famous, unfortunately, for that incident that happened a year or so ago. But it's right on the Thames. Amazing views over the Thames, and it's just a bit of history. It's places you would never ever get to see, and I feel very privileged to experience those things. And I think we've tended to invite guests along just to, you know, give them that bit of exposure. And it's the pomp and ceremony, you know, it's the traditions, the fine dining. I feel very lucky to be part of that.
Tell me, because obviously I've seen your stuff, the ceremonial robes you have to wear. Obviously, people look at that and they can maybe like, "Whoa, what's going on there?" Because they don't know about it. Obviously, it's steeped in history. You know, we're talking thousands of years. Can you tell us a little bit about what that process is for me, really?
Just going back. I mean, livery companies used to try to distinguish themselves from other livery companies, so they adopted their own colours.
Got it.
And it was livery of type, and that's where the name livery companies came from originally. But it's just part of the tradition. It's, you know, the members of the court, and there are about 25 of us, I think, will traditionally wear robes to the court meetings, which is a bit of pomp and ceremony. We all like dressing up, essentially. And it just gives the whole thing a sense of occasion. And you always get there's the deputy master, there is the junior warden, senior warden, the master, and the deputy master, which is what I am at the moment. So 1 year after you're master, you become deputy master, and it's your job then to support the master. If he can't or she can't attend a particular event,
you can step in.
You're asked to go in a place, essentially. And the four wardens will wear robes, as will the clerk and the beadle as well at these events. And I think people who've never been before just love the whole pomp and ceremony of the thing. It's quite an experience. Yeah.
Well, I say hopefully one I'll get to do. Networking seems to be a big part of the latter part of your career. And obviously you're involved with the Hill Club, which I attended my first one. It was a great event. It was great to see the industry together, networking, you know, having a good time and talking about all different stuff. How did you get involved with the Hill Club?
Okay, so we were essentially the London and home counties BICS group.
Yep.
I was the chairman at the time. Really good group of people. Phil Smith was one of them.
We're going to have him on the podcast at some point.
Brilliant. Joe Long was another one. Lorraine Larman at the time was on, and some really fun people.
Yeah.
So essentially, the BICS committee, it kind of got to a stage where BICS were disbanding the regions.
Because I remember when I was first in the industry that they used to have regional events that were quite well attended, and I recall that particular scenario. It doesn't seem to be the case no more, but obviously.
Well, that's where the original boat trip came from, because as our last year as the London and Home Counties branch of BICS, we had a boat trip run by, I can't remember the guy's name now, but anyway, I digress. So essentially they were disbanding the regions, and we could see that was coming. And we had a conversation one day and said, we've got the livery company, we've kind of got BICS. The livery company at the time disapproved of openly networking. So essentially you couldn't go to one of those meetings and start handing your business card out. It was frowned upon. Yeah. It just was, networking was not a word that the livery company liked. It kind of went on, but it went on in a very subtle way. So essentially you would build relationships, and from there, obviously, that could result in building business. So we said, okay, we've got a training organisation, we've got the livery, which frowns to a certain extent on networking. Let's set up our own networking association connected to the cleaning industry. Now, you may not know this, but a guy called Eric Hill, who was a very good friend of my wife's father, was a guy called John Ayres. He'd be 95 now, but he was a chemist and had a chemical industry years and years ago. He was a good friend of Eric Hill. So Eric Hill was the original founder of not only of BICS, but of the environmental cleaners and a Freemasons lodge as well called Turgery. So that great man had started these three organisations. And we thought this is really fitting that if we create a new organisation, that we should bear some deference back to him, essentially. So we went through various names. We eventually came up with the Hill Club.
What was the worst name?
Friends of Eric Hill, I think it was, or something like that. But the Hill Club seemed to be quite appropriate. There was the Doyle Club for the construction industry that we knew of, and we thought, well, let's do one for the cleaning industry. So essentially it was, we made Phil chairman, because originally it was his idea. I stepped in as deputy chair and treasurer. I'd say we had other people, Lorraine Larman, Joe Long, and I think Robbie Sutherland was a founder member, and a few others. I apologise, I can't remember their names at the moment. So people who were quite active in the industry. And it started off really slowly. I think the first boat trip, we might have had 50 people on it. If you look at the latest one, it was nearly 300. Yeah. So it's grown. And essentially what we did is we asked for a sponsor. It was nothing to come along. Yeah. So it was all free in the beginning. Sure. We put on a few little nibbles and a few free, you get a free drink. Yep. And that was from the sponsor. But as it grew, we got more and more sponsors. They were offering more money. And so the kind of free drinks grew, and the food kind of grew. And then I think we introduced a small charge for the event, which was £15 about 3 or 4 years ago. And now we're actually able to give money to charity. So I think we gave away £4,000 this year.
Nice.
I'll have to try and remember who the charities were. Sure. Certainly the livery company, their charity fund got £1,000. There's a men's charity for cancer. Yeah. I think there's a breast cancer charity as well. Sorry, I can't remember.
No, I'm not going to remember specifics.
And also the Living Wage Foundation. Yeah. So we're able to give away £4,000 this year. And that's from those contributions that people make. And I say we're not in it to make money. Essentially, we enjoy the networking. It's good to raise money again for charity and just meet people in the industry. Yeah. And I think lots of business is done, via those meetings. I mean, there are people who refer to it as a jolly. Okay, we're allowed to have a bit of fun. Yeah, of course. Certainly some serious business is done at those events. And I've spoken to people that have picked up, made connections and picked up some serious business.
I attended my first event recently. I was invited by Chris Forbes. Thank you, Chris. And, you know, there are conversations that I've had offline with people, you know, that I've maybe know online that I've now developed relationships with, and I'm in conversations with them outside of that. Will it directly reply to business? Who knows? But, you know, it was definitely a good event and one of the better ones. I mean, to say generally networking is something that I tend to, you know, not be too forthcoming with, but it was fantastic. And I think you know, I enjoyed it. And, you know, it's a hard balance, right? You don't want to go to a networking event where it's very formal, very, you know, do this, don't do that, or whatever. And that can make newcomers uncomfortable. I thought their environment was nice and relaxed, and it was spot on.
Yep. I mean, I think when we first started, you couldn't wear shorts and things like that. It got so hot on some of those boat trips. We are now allow tailored shorts, but no football shorts, please.
Yes, sure, no football shorts. And it's not just a boat trip, is it? You meet up other times throughout the year, and
I think it's really important that we talk about the awards we give as well.
Yeah,
because that's so important to me, that we recognise people that work hard in the industry, and it gives companies a chance to as a sort of an expose for some of the staff that are doing really well. It's good for them to have a day out and be appreciated. Yeah. So I think the Hill Club award ceremonies events are certainly worthwhile, and more people I think now are looking to put their staff forward. So all in all, it's kind of win-win situation. We all have bloody good fun, really. You know, on the events, we get to network, we raise money for charity, and we get to recognise people in the industry that are doing good work.
Yeah. How anyone could criticise that? You know,
there are people out there that do, and we all know who they are. But hey, that's their problem, and it's not ours. We think we're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a worthwhile cause. So back to you personally. Clearly, through delivery, everything you've done in between, the Hill Club, networking, you must be an advocate for that. How has networking changed you and your business acumen and your business altogether as a catch-all?
I think it's made me a lot more confident in social situations. I mean, I used to absolutely die. My wife always talks about the first time she took me to meet someone. We only just got together, took me to meet some of her friends, and I was kind of petrified. I wouldn't say a word. It was literally that bad.
Yeah.
But I think the experience I had in 2008 made me realise unless I changed the way I was fundamentally, then my lot would stay the same. So I think it's overcoming that built-in fear that I had. And don't get me wrong, even now, speaking at some of those livery events, before I used to get quite nervous. And most people that know me realise that. But I think what I did was practice those speeches to make sure that I knew them inside out. I went on a public speaking course up in Edinburgh a few years ago. That gave me a bit of confidence. And it's about taking your time, delivering your message, and not being frightened to pause.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting into speaking now rather than networking, but yeah, I think I tend to do the same thing now. When I speak, I try to speak fairly slowly because it gives the old brain time to work. Whereas before, I was a different person. Everything come out at 100 miles an hour.
And that's nerves as well, isn't it? Sometimes.
Very much so. So it's certainly a journey for me, but I would advocate networking in the right kind of environments. Believe me, I've been to networking events that are totally irrelevant. Yeah. Not industry connected at all. And you end up talking to a guy that's got a printing shop down the road or somebody that runs an estate agent, and it's got to be the right kind of networking. And I think for the cleaning industry, then certainly the Hill Club is. Yeah. And the place to go. And developing relationships. I think that's another one that's very much so key within your story. You mentioned lots of different names of people that I've met and haven't met that are well respected in the industry, and you clearly got good relationships with those people. So how important is relationships within every facet of business, not just necessarily the cleaning industry? For me, it's absolutely crucial. Is it the number one skill that you need with your customers, your colleagues, everything? Relationships. I think it is. Yeah, I think it absolutely is. I I'm fairly lucky in that I have a passion, and that really is the environment. So I've been able to talk to people genuinely about the changes I think that we need in the cleaning industry.
What are those changes, Gary?
Well, it's starting to happen already. I mean, I got up at a conference at the Wildlife Fund back in, I think it was 2020. And I predicted that in the next 5 years, we'd see massive changes away from petrochemical-based products to probiotics and vegetable-based products. And I think that's happened without a doubt now. People are coming away from petrochemical products. I mean, I'm a great believer in the circular economy. So I'm a big fan of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which promotes a circular economy. And it's really all about finding ways to keep things within a closed loop. So if you buy something, it needs to be able to be reused again. Now, if you think about petrochemicals, you use them once, essentially go down the drain.
Yep.
I think the difference with bacteria and vegetables, when they go down the drain, they go into the sea, but they end up feeding the fishes, essentially. Mm-hmm. So it's all part of the circular economy. So you can't just take something out of the ground.
Not replenish it back in some shape
absolutely.
or form.
It then changes its whole construction, and it's no longer able to be used again, whereas vegetables, bacteria are constantly going into this circular environment where they're used again. So for me, that's an absolute no-brainer. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I couldn't explain this stuff to you technically. But if you look at it purely from a layman's perspective, it's a no-brainer. Yeah. It works. And I find these products to be, in not all circumstances, but in 99% of environments, they're actually more effective. You know, they clean deeper. The bacteria get into the smallest cracks in a surface. Mm-hmm. I remember one particular client, and I've got to recount this story. We had a client, and we still have this client, which is the Olympia Exhibition Centre. And the lady in there, Christina Jarrett, I think her name is, really wanted to get away from petrochemical type products, essentially. And she was using 20 different petrochemical products. Yeah. We went in there, we introduced the whole concept of cleaning with probiotics and vegetables. She gave it a go. And I remember Jasmine, our social media lady at the time, interviewed her. And she said she couldn't believe that she could discount these 20 petrochemical type products and survive with just three basically different probiotics. Yeah. So that was a major thing for me, to think that we'd convinced a venue of that importance and shown them the way to go. Yeah. And they were pretty much a pioneer with us. And one of our other clients, they were the guys that really helped us get it over the line. They gave us the volume. They got behind it 100% and gave us the volumes then to start bringing it into the country and distributing it. Mm. And I think if it hadn't have been for COVID, the conversion process of our clients would have been a lot quicker. But don't get me wrong, it's happening now. It took a setback then. But I'd say that now probably 80% of our clients are using probiotics and vegetables. And I'm sure we'll convert the others in the next year or so. Yeah,
it's a bit of a tough one with that green initiative within the industry, isn't it? Because you mentioned there's a pound and pence industry. Yeah. And then when you generally, people don't do cost and use analysis and items like that, do they? They just look at, well, I've got this chemical here and this one here. Yeah. This one's cheaper than this one, so I'm going to go with this one.
Do you know, one of the things I found in the beginning, most people felt that environmentally friendly products were more expensive, and I think they were in the early days. Yes, but I don't think they are anymore. Okay. I mean, if you think you can buy a bottle of 1 litre of probiotic cleaner that might dilute 100 to 1, and that might cost you £8, £9, £10. How much does that make one trigger spray? Sure. So I don't think that's the argument anymore. Maybe the ready-to-use stuff like the organic descalers, maybe they're slightly more expensive, but I think you've got the saving on the dilutable product initially.
Is there any other ways that you guys are looking at Janitorial Express, how we can improve the environment, improve the cleaning industry from a green aspect?
Yeah, I mean, my own company in particular, we're working on a carbon reduction program where we essentially look at what you're currently using, make recommendations, and then be able to report back to you exactly what you're saving on particular sites.
Okay.
Which then means you can go back to your own client essentially and say, look, by making this change, we've saved you X amount of milligrams of CO2 or whatever. So that's a really big thing for us at the moment. The other thing that Jangro are working on is Scope 3 emissions, which is a particularly complicated subject. So it's not only about the emissions that you're responsible for yourself, it's the whole supply chain before you, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's complex. I've got to tell you, it's really, really, really complex. But we're committed to it. And the board meeting I told you about at Jangro in the Forest of Arden 2 weeks ago, that was the main focus for the group. It's how we're going to get to terms with Scope 3. Mm. Because at the moment, I don't think many people are talking about it.
No.
Most people are getting Scope 1 and Scope 2. They're coming to terms with that. But Scope 3 is the biggest challenge we'll face. And I think as a group, Jangro are committed to helping our clients to come to terms with that and be able to report the relevant information. Big task, as I say, but there's a real commitment there.
Mm. And so you mentioned how passionate you are for that, and clearly throughout your career, everything you're passionate about, you've turned around and had great success with. So I'm sure
today,
sure that will be no different. Gary, I always ask everyone that sits with me, if you could give any advice to someone getting in the cleaning industry or into business as general, what would that be? What would that one piece of advice be? I know that's a very broad question.
I would say embrace innovation, even more so these days than when I first started. You need to be out there. You need to be looking for the latest innovations. Clearly, the environment's a big thing, and you can't take your eye off that because it's what everyone's talking about. But I think, that we've got ChatGPT. It's potential threat to all of us, essentially. So keep an eye on that. You need to do your homework. You need to look at what's out there in the marketplace. And you need to use that technology, and you need to offer that to your clients, because if you're not, somebody else will be.
Yeah.
So, innovation, technology. The only other thing is I'd say be true to yourself. Don't ever give up on your own morals. Essentially, don't take work that is not right. Don't work with people that are not right. And there are people out there. Just walk away from it, because in the end, it'll come back and bite you in the rear.
Yeah.
Believe me. So, be true to yourself and work with good people. Don't take on customers that.
I've been guilty of that previously.
I think we all have.
You sit with people and you think, this guy or girl ain't for me.
Yeah.
But you think, but that could lead on to this or whatever it may be.
And I think sometimes.
And you're right. It always comes back to bite you.
Yeah, it does, without a doubt. And I've seen it. I've seen long-term relationships which I knew weren't right, but they continued. We were doing something right, but in the end, it goes sour. And, it's not nice.
Yeah. Well, Gary, I don't have any other discussion points for you today. Thank you for your time. Obviously, time is the greatest asset that we've all got. So for you to come and sit with me for an hour and talk about your journey, which has been fantastic. Thank you. So I really appreciate that. So that wraps up another episode, guys. As always, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Follow us on all your favourite podcast platforms. Gary, if people want to connect with you, where can they do that? On LinkedIn, I would assume?
LinkedIn, and also www.janitorialexpress.co.uk.
Yes, for all your janitorial supplies. Gary, thank you again.
Lovely.
And we'll catch you guys on the next episode.
Thank you.